And welcome to another edition of the Curses and Champions podcast, an exclusive podcast of the Chicago Sports Column. Alongside Ryan Wooden, I'm Matt Gentile, and we're going to talk some baseball today, of course. And, let's pour one out for Darren real quick since he's not here.
Have fun on vacation, buddy.
Yeah, no, enjoy it. He's going to Colorado. Probably going to digest edibles out there.
Whoa. Prospective employers, I hope we're not listening.
Yeah, no, hopefully not. Yeah, if he does, he should tell some stories on the podcast when he gets back.
Exactly.
I think we should just have one podcast dedicated to...
Just to edibles.
Yeah, to Rocky Mountain High. Yeah, so I wanted to, of course, get into, what's been going on with the Cubs lately. And since our last podcast, they've really heated up and, they're starting to hit their stride a little bit.
Yeah, they're playing great baseball at this point. I mean, they are a half game back of the Brewers now at this moment. So, still, obviously, they've covered a lot of ground. They were playing really mediocre baseball. We're only 3 or 4 games over 500 last time we were on here. Now they're 12 games over 500. They're playing probably the best stretch of baseball they have offensively throughout the course of the entire year.
I think there's 2 guys that really stick out during this whole stretch. Well, 3. I think Anthony Rizzo's been a big one. I had written, a few weeks ago that Anthony Rizzo was kind of like that new glue guy in the lineup.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of the new, you go, we go.
Yeah.
I think people hate hearing that phrase so much. Joe Mann comes up with all these cutesy phrases, and you kind of sound weird when you have to repeat it, but you know what I mean.
He's a great manager, but he is definitely cheesy when it comes to the taglines.
The man loves his cornball. But Anthony Rizzo's, been a big cog to the machine. But I think 2 other guys that stick out. Jon Lester. I think he's been very consistent this season. 13 starts, 7-2, 2.2, 2 ERA. 109 whip, and 7 quality starts. And I think the big thing with him is he's been able to get through games. He's eating up innings, which has been a problem with some of the Cubs starters so far.
You can tell that he has a chip on his shoulder over the way last year ultimately went for him. 200 innings is honestly that might be the stat that he cares about more so than anything other than winning and winning championships.
He was so defensive about that last season.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's one thing that he thinks is terrible about today's game is that no guys get to 200 innings. Like, it's a rarity now.
Mm-hmm.
He and John Lackey, they're the 2, right in the ass guys last year, and they both were adamant about it.
Yeah. And, you can tell this year he feels like it's his obligation to take the ball and give them 6 or 7 strong innings so that they don't have to use up their bullpen, knowing that so many other people around him, and it's not even necessarily, something where it's against his teammates or anything like that, but so many pitchers in baseball as in totality around him aren't going to give you that that they're going to have to give the ball up in the 5th and 6th inning and ultimately cost your bullpen a ton of innings. And he feels the obligation to be that guy who takes it and goes 6 or 7 at a time.
You bring up a good point there about not taxing the bullpen. The bullpen's been lights out for the Cubs. Lately, though, it seems like Joe Mann's getting a lot of criticism for going to the pen in certain situations. Saw it with Jose Quintana.
I think Hendricks got pinch hit in the 5th inning while Estella was it yesterday or 2 days ago?
Yes. So that's kind of, it's a sore point for a lot of people. And I understand his reasoning a lot for, wanting to go to the bullpen, try and get them as much run as possible because it's going to be up to the starters as you get later in the season. In the postseason, the one thing I am worried about is taxing the bullpen so that by the time you get to October, and we've seen how bullpens are critical in the postseason. I'm just afraid that he's going to start taxing it to a point where they're going to be overworked by the time you get to later.
It's funny because I feel like you've seen a philosophical shift overall in baseball where even when you get into October and when you expect those starters innings to, really kind of eat up crucial innings there, a lot of teams are still kind of going the opposite route because it's a little bit more cost effective and because you have so many power arms and bullpens that they'll go and stake out a dominant 7th, 8th, and 9th inning guy and feel like they've got those 3 innings covered and so now they only need 6 from their starter. Whereas, you look at, say, the White Sox World Series run where they essentially never gave the ball to their bullpen because their starting pitching was so dominant at that point where you expected those guys in that 4-man rotation in the postseason with the days off to go 8 or 9 innings. A lot of teams don't do that anymore.
And, that's what makes that team a complete rarity, and I don't think we'll ever see something like that again just because, the philosophy's changed so much.
Yeah.
Even in, it's not that long ago. That's only 12 years ago, 13 years ago.
Even in the postseason with these high leverage situations where you feel the most comfortable with these starters that you know and love, you're not going to have guys throw 130 pitches the way that they did during that postseason and in the decade really leading up to that. It's just changed.
True. And I do want to get back into some pitching stuff later, but one other person I want to call out is somebody that I think has really been instrumental in this run. We were talking about it before we went live here, is Jason Heyward. Mm-hmm. I think Jason Heyward, has been red hot the last 14 games. If you go back to May, I have it right here, May 26th, his slash line is 375 batting average, 397 OBP, 554 slugging percentage.
It's really, really impressive. I mean, even just looking at his game log, what he's been able to give you over the course of the entire time he's got 6 multi-hit games over that span.
And at least 11 games with at least one hit. Mm-hmm. So that when you get that from Jason Heyward, that's why he's consistently playing. Because I think we're seeing Albert Almora get more consistently added to the lineup day in and day out. I think you would have seen more Ben Zobrist in right field had Heyward not, gotten hot. I think we will probably see, Zobrist in a lot of situations anyway. Mm-hmm. But I think you got to ride the hot hand, and Jason Heyward has been red hot right now.
I still think, to a certain extent, obviously, given everything that he gives you defensively and given the contract that ultimately that he has, the Cubs are still hopeful that at some point you're going to see him be a little bit more dynamic offensively. They're probably not, crazy to think that they're going to get the guy that he was in Atlanta, his third year in the league when he had 27 homers and 81 driven in, and be that huge power guy that they could rely upon, to give them a ton of production offensively. But if he's even just what he is right now over the course of the season, that's extremely helpful to them. He's a 273, 333, 412 slash guy. That works.
Yeah, absolutely. And what you're seeing now is a little more in line with what he was in St. Louis, because he wasn't really a power guy that season in St. Louis in 2015. But this is very similar to that. He's getting on base. He has games where he has multiple hits, scoring crucial runs, has a lot of clutch at bats. So I think this is something that I think Cubs fans were expecting when that contract was signed in 2016. So it's promising, and I think that it does give Joe Madden a little more creativity with the lineup, and he's able to set a more consistent lineup, because if you have that defensive key like Heyward is, and he's hitting, then you don't have to worry about sacrificing anything in your lineup. So.
Yeah, I mean, he's been in the lineup and continued to be in the lineup over the course of the last 2 years, even when he wasn't hitting, because he's that dominant defensively. He plays a defensive right field where he covers a ton of ground and has a cannon that you're not going to run on, and that gives you so much confidence as a pitcher, even as an infielder playing in front of him, that you can take a little bit of a chance there, because you know that he's got the ability to bail you out if a ball goes into the hole and you're Javi Baez and you're trying to make a crazy play to get an out where you're there. You know that Jason Heyward has the arm that's there to be able to back you up and throw a guy out at home from second in those situations. So if he can hit the way that he even is, like at this moment, maybe not even as hot as he has been for the last 2 weeks, the value is off the charts for them.
They've hit their stride at this point. And it seems like they're definitely way ahead of schedule. Like if you compare it to last year, and that's encouraging, because you don't want to burn out post All-Star break. That's not something you want to do consistently. But if you had to point out like one weakness that you think they need to maybe look to improve, if you get to the trade deadline, if there's an opportunity, is there anything that you think? I know, as an outsider, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, I think the pitching depth is certainly an issue there. They don't have any one particular huge problem other than Yu Darvish, and obviously if you're considering the idea that, injuries that probably hampered him through the early portion of this season, and he's still getting used to this ballpark, having thrown in the cold like he has had through the first 2 months of the year, all the little things that might ultimately add up to him being significantly better off whenever it is that he returns from the disabled list. You probably feel still pretty good about the staff, but you'd probably like to have a little bit more depth. Tyler Chatwood is still problematic in the sense that he's
Tyler Chatwood scares the shit out of me.
A ton of people. Yeah.
Tyler Chatwood, it's insane how he gets out of so many jams, but you're going to play with a lot of fire, and eventually you're going to get burned. So Tyler Chatwood that's the guy that I think could end up being an odd man out, especially with Mike Montgomery. And again, it's a very small sample size. But in these 3 starts, he's been very solid. And I think that's a guy that I could see as we start getting closer to the All-Star break. You might see, and I'm using quotes over here. We do this a lot where we do air quotes while we're talking on the mic.
But as if we're videos.
Yeah, exactly. But, like Jon Lester might have some rest. Like 10 days on the disabled list. Like that 10-day DL saves your butt. You're able to do these kind of things. And
skip 2 starts.
Exactly. And I think you might see... Montgomery gets some run there, but I agree with you. If they can find an arm at the deadline that, can give him some run at the end of the year, into the postseason, I think you pull the trigger, and especially with rentals, you're able to, you don't have to give up as much to get a quality arm like that. So maybe there's, some names and some rumblings. Maybe we'll talk more about that as we get closer to the break. But yeah, I think that might be the area that you can definitely improve on. And maybe add a bullpen piece.
Yeah, I mean, you can always add a bullpen arm.
It is a
when
strength,
you feel really, really confidently with where they're at right now. You do have Carl Edwards and Eddie Butler on the 10-day DL both at this moment. And so
and Butler just got bumped to the 60-day DL today.
So, ultimately they're going to be spending quite a significant amount of time out. Even when they do come back, those injuries have a tendency sometimes to continue to plague them. I mean, so it never, ever hurts to add an additional arm, whether it be a specialist or another power arm that can go out there and give you good looks in high-leverage situations. So.
Absolutely. And, we were talking a little bit about, Yu Darvish. So what it sounds like, according to Jesse Rogers, Yu Darvish is going to have a bullpen session in Milwaukee this week. And that'll be the first time he's thrown off a mound since he went on the DL. So it's been concerning. It's been a while. And you have to think that he probably won't start until right before the All-Star break or at the very, earliest, or at the very least after the All-Star break.
Yeah, I would say it sounds like a best-case scenario from that element if he's just now taking the mound traditionally the way you see those types of situations play out in terms of developing the arm. He'll throw from the mound. He'll start having 20, 30 pitch simulated games over the course of the next week or so, depending on how that mound session goes. Once he gets up to the point where he can throw 50 or 60 pitches, either in a side or in a simulated session, they'll give him a rehab start or two, depending on how deep in the game they feel like he can go into. I mean, it's always better in this stage and in this day and age to be a little bit on the pessimistic side and kind of take it slow and easy, especially with a guy who you give a little bit of concern given the array of pitches he throws and the amount of pressure that he puts on his elbow and his injury history. You just don't want to overtax him, and you certainly want him to be as healthy as humanly possible for the stretch run that the Cubs are ultimately going to be a part of. So there's no sense in trying to rush him back in 2 weeks, even if it is a possibility.
And I wrote about this in the piece I wrote about, Jake Arrieta, like, people are pining for Jake Arrieta, and they're tying it to, Yu Darvish's struggles. And I think they're always going to be joined at the hip. You can't avoid it. The one thing, though, that I think people get very caught up in is they're very worried that Yu Darvish has to be that savior Jake Arrieta was. I don't think that's necessarily what the Cubs are hoping from him. I think they just want him to eat up innings, get wins in the regular season. And I think the way that the pitching staff right now is constructed, you have Hendricks, Lester, and even Quintana, who I think are, very solid pitchers in high leverage situations.
Yeah.
Even Quintana, I know he doesn't have a big postseason resume to work off of.
Yeah.
I mean, it was just last season. But Quintana has shown in certain situations that, if he gets into a jam or he's down 3-0, he can get out of it. Or, if he gives up a run or two, he usually can bounce back with like 2 or 3 solid innings.
There's a general steadiness to what he's done, even throughout his time in the White Sox. And like you said, obviously the White Sox haven't given him those types of situations to be a part of. But I mean, even in the games in which, he gets put into high leverage situations, 6th, 7th inning, trying to pitch his way deeper into ball games, you used to see it with the White Sox constantly. He was largely the same person that he was in the 2nd and 3rd inning. There's not a lot of variance there. He doesn't get too high, too low. Like any pitcher, he's going to get shelled from time to time, but for the most part, you understand what you're going to get when he takes the bump every 5th day.
And I think those are the guys that they're going to count on the most, come playoff time. So, again, you want Yu Darvish to live up to his contract, but at the same time, I think they built this rotation to almost mask him in those certain situations. So, it should be interesting as I think we get closer to the break and as we, start to get towards that, trade deadline time. It's always a lot of fun when you start hearing the rumors. And the Cubs tend to act a little earlier than most teams. They try and get their trades done before or around the All-Star break. So it will be fun to watch. So I say we hop on the L. Let's take the red line.
Let's go.
Let's go down. Let's head south. Let's talk a little White Sox.
35th in the Dan Ryan.
Let's do it. The Sox have piled up actually some wins lately since our last podcast.
They've gone 6-4 in their last 10.
Yeah,
so they're playing probably their. I think they had 6 out of 10 1 point earlier in the season.
Yeah.
But it matches their best 10-game streak that they've had thus far.
And I know, like, at the end of the day, having a winning season isn't really the end game here, but I think there's been some encouraging signs. You've alluded to it a lot lately.
Yeah, I think, again, like you said, the overall record ultimately is meaningless, and even if they play a really good stretch of baseball over the course of weeks at a time, still largely meaningless. You're still looking for kind of these individual wins. But as you start to play significantly less, just like grueling baseball, hard to watch baseball, it's a little bit easier to spot some of those bright spots. And so I did a piece on ChicagoSportsColumn.com just the other day that really kind of highlighted some of the pleasant surprises and bright spots that we've seen thus far. And I mean, the list is longer than even what I included, but I think I had 6 in there.
Yeah.
Ronaldo Lopez has certainly proven himself to be a, at worst, middle of the rotation, if not top of the rotation guy at this point. He's an innings eater. Mm-hmm. He's reliable. When he's on, he can be absolutely dominant.
Yes.
Jace Fry's a bullpen piece that I don't think anyone expected to see cemented at this point. They thought they might have a lefty specialist in him there, but he's come on and been a guy who I think you can guarantee, even as we see this pitching process play out and all these power arms start to run through the rotation and eventually matriculate into the bullpen, he's not going anywhere. He's been steady. His arsenal makes him difficult both on lefties and righties, so he's gotten more overall value than your traditional one-out lefty specialist would. I think Daniel Palka and Matt Davidson offensively have been surprises.
The exit velocity readings that you get from him are insane. I mean, he's up there in the majors.
Yeah, he's there with Giancarlo Stanton and Aaron Judge are really the only rarefied air that he hasn't touched yet. He's not a consistent 119 to like 122 guy like both of those guys are, but I do believe he has 3 or 4 of the top 20 exit velocities in baseball this year, which is pretty insane because his profile it's a funny one. He's got a funky swing. He doesn't play a particularly good defensive right field. He does not draw walks at all, but when he makes contact, he absolutely hammers the ball, hits from the left side. So that sort of power is always going to be welcome. There are certain elements to, specifically with the exit velocity, he barrels the ball. Barrels a stat where, StatCast has done the math and shown anytime you hit the ball at a certain launch angle and a certain exit velocity, you've got a chance of having a 500 batting average or a 1,500 slugging percentage or higher on all of these types of likely events. Now, it doesn't guarantee you anything based on shifts and all that, but he's barreled so many balls since he's come up that it actually indicates that his average should be significantly higher than it would. I mean, it takes you another cut even beyond BABIP in the sense of like understanding how unlucky he's been at times. Mm-hmm. But huge power, and that gives you some value and just some depth in the outfield in general, which is, welcome. The outfield is a problem right now. It's something they're allowing to be a problem because they know they have plenty of talent in the minor league system right now. They just don't feel the need to rush them along. And having guys like Daniel Palka helps that because without a Palka, if you're sitting there with just Trace Thompson and Charlie Tilson and Adam Engel, and especially if Engel was still struggling the way he was, you might be inclined to feel like you have to call up Eloy Jimenez at this point. And that's not necessarily in the best interest of the franchise.
I actually loved what Rick Hahn told Scott Merkin. Merkin asked him, when can you tell fans maybe we can expect to see Kopech and Eloy? Basically said, well, you can see them now. You can see Kopech in Charlotte. You could see, Eloy in Birmingham. Mm-hmm. And I think that's and he's right. Like, they got to take their time. They got to take this slow. And I think it'll benefit them in the long run because really you're able right now to find those other pieces to kind of fill out the rest of your roster.
Whether it's, again, with Palka and Davidson in particular, I don't know that they're going to be long-term pieces. Palka in particular, but you need a bridge to get to 2020 when all these guys start showing up. And so guys like that have value to you.
I want to jump in actually with a question about Davidson. Mm-hmm. Is that a piece that you would look and say, all right, I don't know if it would be, this trade deadline or maybe next during the offseason. Mm-hmm. Is that a piece that potentially you might take and flip?
If they'll take and flip anyone that they can at this point. A similar piece, he was on my bright spot list as well, Jose Abreu. Yeah. It's the exact same. Obviously, there's a lot longer history of consistency, and he's a significantly higher profile player who's probably worth way more than Matt Davidson in the open market. But they'll flip anybody, and I think Jose Abreu, in a perfect world, everyone would love to see him stay, but if someone is really needing a right-handed bat that is consistent and 100% reliable, they're going to take it. It's going to be the same general element with Matt Davidson. The one thing I kind of like about Davidson and the reason why I would consider keeping him around until at least 2020 is they've got 2 years before he even hits arbitration. Yeah. Late start to his career, and there's a lot to indicate in his game right now that this is who he's going to be. He's become the most patient hitter in the organization. He's drawn more walks than anybody has. I think he has 31 walks already this year, had 19 all of last year, and he hasn't lost any of the power in changing that hitting approach. And so suddenly he becomes, a mid-800s OPS guy who can play first and third and DH for you. Can't play either of those positions particularly well, but the versatility is of value to you. And so if you have to pay him $545,000 for the next 2 years, you're probably going to try to milk as much of that as humanly possible, unless someone picks up the phone and offers you a prospect you can't turn down.
Another guy that I actually wanted to ask you about before we wrap up here, Tim Anderson.
Mm-hmm.
How are you feeling about, his season this year? I mean, definitely taking a little bit more walks than I think anybody expected.
Yeah, he's taken more walks. I think he's taken a larger step in terms of overall power production than I think people expected him to take yet. There are a few peripherals that suggest the power numbers will come down slightly, but they do actually still project to say he has actually taken an overall step. This isn't flukish. The most encouraging sign is he's always been a guy who runs really, really well.
Yeah.
Hits the ball hard and on the ground and on the line. Few more fly balls, so you don't necessarily think that his BABIP is going to be in the 330 to 340 range the way that it's been over the course of his career. But I think his BABIP's like 270 right now. So even if it's back to like a standard mean of 300, which is what the average is for batting average on balls in play is 300. Mm-hmm. Even if he just raises back to that level, you're going to see his average go up 30 points. You're going to see that OBP rise up, and he suddenly becomes, a low 800s OPS guy. And at that point, with the speed that he gives you, the power that he gives you, the defensive range that he has, and he continues to improve defensively constantly, he's going to be their long-term shortstop. And that's what they've been waiting on, because I don't think that's been a certainty up until this point when he started to refine the plate approach and really start to hone in on what it is that he can do best offensively.
Is it accurate to describe him as a sabermetrician's worst nightmare?
I think it certainly was. It's gotten this year suddenly. If you're a sabermetrician, you're actually trying to find, you'll see Fangraph think pieces constantly about where in the world this is coming from, because there's been nothing to suggest in his entire career that he could be this. But it's been clear, based even on the way that he celebrates when he gets down to first base after he draws a walk, that the organization has given him the mandate of, hey, you have to refine your plate approach. You can't be hunting first pitch 60% of the time. You've got to go deeper into counts. You've got to draw some walks. And you've got to be able to maintain the rest of the overall offensive potential that you've shown, but without taking 13 walks a year. So
absolutely. And
he's done it.
And, it's I know we say this a lot, or at least I say this a lot, as somebody that is kind of on the outside, because I am a Cubs fan. But it has been actually really entertaining. I do find myself stopping and watching a lot of Sox games. They're still actually pretty fun to watch, even with just some of these younger, unknown pieces.
Yeah, and they've gotten a lot more fun to watch. The starting pitching is starting to come together a little bit better. Dylan Covey's another one of those guys who, again, I don't know how he projects long term, but suddenly he's looking like he is going to pitch well enough to try to weasel his way into that conversation. And he was gone after last year. He's a guy who was kind of a fixture in their rotation, was really kind of the highest example of his futility. He was a 7.71 ERA guy. He's been dominant for 5 or 6 starts this year. So as they continue to find those pieces, like you mentioned, like a Polka, like a Covey, who can help fill the blanks in until some of these prospects are here, it's going to make the baseball infinitely more watchable, and it's just going to give the organization way more options, whether it's flip these guys, get stuff back for them, or they somehow work their way into the long-term plans.
And it also allows you to do more breakdowns, more coverage, more analysis, which you'll be able to find at the Chicago Sports Column. That's www.chicagosportscolumn.com. You can also find us on Twitter at Chi Sports Column. That's CHI Sports Column. And also like us on Facebook, because we love to be liked. At least I do. I also love to be helped.
We desperately seek approval.
Yes, I need my mom's approval all the time. Yeah, but she doesn't have a Facebook, so she doesn't do anything.
It's problematic. We need those likes.
Absolutely.
Get her on Facebook. Just make her a burner account.
And I'm gonna do the Brian Colangelo style burner account for my mom.
There you go.
Alongside Ryan Wooden, I'm Matt Gentile. Thanks for listening.